DeForest Kelley. This is episode 60.
You're listening to 70s Trek with Bob Turner and Kelly Casco, the fan podcast that looks at Star Trek in the 1970s. It was the decade that built a franchise.
While many believe he played the first Star Trek Doctor, he actually played the third. I'm Bob Turner.
And I'm Kelly Casco. DeForest Kelley's portrayal of Dr. Leonard McCoy is classic among Star Trek fans, as well as in pop culture.
It sure has become a classic. And we're going to talk all about D. Kelley in just a minute. But first, let's tell our listeners how they can find us.
Sure. Just visit our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/70s Trek. And you can also send us an email to 70strek@gmail.com.
You can also find the show on iTunes and now Stitcher and SoundCloud. Just search for 70s Trek. And when you do, please leave us a comment, a review, or just follow us. It all helps other Trek fans find the show. What would Captain Kirk or Mr. Spock be without Dr. McCoy? He was cantankerous, irritable, irascible, and at times even belligerent.
But McCoy also served as the most human voice on the show. He often questioned Kirk's or Spock's stance on a topic and made them think about the moral and ethical implications of their decisions.
You know, and I'm convinced that the character of McCoy only worked on the show because of D. Kelley, the actor who played him. DeForest Kelley brought a very different quality to McCoy, something I think that another actor would not have had. So, Kelly, why don't you tell us about the early life of actor DeForest Kelley?
Sure. Well, DeForest Kelley was born Jackson DeForest Kelley on January 20th, 1920, in Toccoa, Georgia. His parents, Clara and Ernest David Kelley, named him after this pioneering electronics engineer named Lee DeForest. He developed or pioneered the way to do sound on film.
So, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, little foreshadowing there for D. Kelley.
Right. Now, there's a lot more to what the guy did, but that's a different show for somebody else to do. Kelley, growing up, he was very involved in his dad's church. His dad was a Baptist minister, and he sang during the services.
D. Kelley sang?
Yes, he was a singer.
Wow.
He did solos predominantly there as he got older. This led to an appearance on a radio station in Atlanta, WSB-AM. And then later, he even got a gig with Lou Forbes and his orchestra at Paramount Theater. I didn't know that before doing this research, that he was an actual singer.
How about that?
Yeah. So he then later, the family moved to Decatur, Georgia, where he got involved in the local theater, and that's where he sort of got the bug. Then at age 17, he went to visit his uncle in Long Beach, California. Now, this is his first trip out of Georgia. He's never been anywhere.
At what age? 18?
17.
17. Wow.
Yeah, he was going to stay a couple weeks, but that ended up turning into a year. And when he returned home, he's telling his parents, hey, I'm moving to California. I want to be an actor. Now, his mom, big supporter. You go. Good job. I support you. His dad, had different opinion. So
dads always do.
They always do. Now, while he's living in California, he joined a local theater group, and that's where he met his longtime wife, only wife, Carol. and they got married in 1945. Now, he served in World War II. He served as an enlisted man in the Army, Air Forces, and he enlisted in 43, March 43, and he was in until January of 46. Now, towards the end of the war, a talent scout spotted him, a talent scout for Paramount Pictures, spotted him in a Navy training film called Time to Kill. And this led to his very first screen test and then a contract to star in his very first movie, which was Fear in the Night in 1947.
Isn't that interesting, too, that it was Paramount
Yes.
who noticed him? And, of course,
Yeah.
later on, Star Trek would come to be owned by Paramount.
Right.
Wow.
I watched an interview with him on YouTube, and he was talking about, I think, Star Trek II, and he's like, yeah, this is kind of ironic. I'm on a Paramount lot. I'm probably going to finish my career doing Star Trek, and this is where I started on this same lot.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah. Now, DeForest has 129 acting credits, including his Navy training film.
Oh, is it on IMDb?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. So most of his acting credits, it's incredible. Most of it was before Star Trek.
Right.
He didn't, and I'm sure you're going to get into this a little later, but I thought that was incredible. I mean, he was basically one of the most seasoned actors.
He
came on, right? And there towards, as he got closer to that time of going to Star Trek, their like 10-year period, he mostly did Westerns. And ironically, since he's such a nice guy, he was playing bad guys.
I know, right? He was always wearing the black hat. He was
Right.
one of those guys, a cattle rustler or a guy that held up the stagecoach.
Yep, exactly. So, like I said, his first role was in Fear in the Night. In that same year, he was cast as more of a lead actor in Variety Girl, which also starred Bob Hope and Bing Crosby.
Oh,
So he was on his way to be a lead actor. He even, and this is kind of funny, and I don't think he really liked this. He had his first fan club based off of this Variety Girl movie.
really?
Yeah. So, well, he didn't really want to be necessarily that spotlight guy, all the attention on him, so to speak. He really wanted to kind of just keep a personal life, and didn't really want to be that, all the reporters chasing you down and everything. So, now after Variety Girl, he and his wife moved to New York City. And while he was there, he did stage and some live TV. They lived there for about 3 years, and he decided to move back to Hollywood and keep doing the movie and TV thing. So let me go over just some highlights. Now, Time to Kill, his Navy short that he did, or it's really a training film, thought it was interesting. It also included George Reeves, Superman from back in the day,
Nice.
and Betty White.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Again, he did Fear in the Night, Variety Girl, which we've talked about. Now, these are movies, so I'm going to run through movies and TV. In 54, he did another movie, Duffy at San Quentin. 55, he did a movie called Illegal. Now, this had Edward G. Robinson and Hugh Marlowe and Jane Mansfield. So some big stars in these movies that he's in. He also did in 56, The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit.
That's a very famous movie.
It is. And he played a medic. And he had maybe a little foreshadowing line in this where he says, "The man is dead, Captain."
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
I guess there's only so many ways you could say that, but that's still kind of ironic, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And that's what, a full 10 years before.
Right. That's interesting.
57, he starred in a movie that also had Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas, Gunfight at the OK Corral.
Yes.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But he was Morgan Earp, so he wasn't a bit role.
No, and actually that's one of his most famous roles besides Dr. McCoy.
Exactly. He was in a 1957 movie, Raintree County, which had Elizabeth Taylor and Montgomery Clift, and also Lee Marvin. And then another one I think is, maybe, I don't know, a big movie for him, but had big stars. Warlock in 1959 had Henry Fonda and Anthony Quinn. His TV stuff, he started in 1949, really. He did some other stuff, but smaller roles. But in 1949, he was in 3 episodes of Lone Ranger.
That's awesome.
Yeah. This was interesting. I wish they'd redo this series. 1953 to 56 or so, he was in 9 episodes of You Are There. Now, this was anchored by Walter Cronkite, and it's a show that basically reported on history as if it was actually happening.
Oh, I've seen clips from this. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's a really cool concept.
It is.
Now, one of the episodes, it was called The Gunfight at the OK Corral, and this was in 1955, and he played Ike Clanton. Ike. So he's played in 2 of this variations of the Gunfight at OK Corral. I'll leave ... there. All right. He did 4 episodes of Zane Grey Theater. He had a decent role in 1957 in The Silent Service, which he was a submarine captain. He had 2 other episodes that he played in too, but the one where he was the submarine captain was significant. He played in Wanted Dead and Alive, Boots and Saddles. In 1960, then, he was in a TV pilot called 333 Montgomery. And it was written by Gene Roddenberry. So this is Gene Roddenberry's first exposure to him. So, and actually, Gene remembered him from this.
I was going to say, clearly he made an impression.
Yes. 1960, he was also in Lawman. 61, Perry Mason. 61, also Riverboat and Bat Masterson. He did 4 episodes of Bonanza, 4 episodes of Death Valley Days. He also was in Have Gun Will Travel. You can see, the theme here. 1962, he was also in Laredo, and 2 episodes of Route 66. 65, he was in The Fugitive and the Donna Reed Show, and then he was in the TV pilot for A Police Story, or not A Police Story, but Police Story, which was produced by Gene Roddenberry.
Another Roddenberry production.
Exactly. And of course, as we talked about in an earlier episode, it also included Grace Lee Whitney.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now he's had this pretty much 10-year run, predominantly playing a villain. And he's getting a little worried he's getting typecast.
You think?
Yeah. So he went looking for, something to get him out of that, that rut, if you'd call it. Mm-hmm. So in 64, he was in a movie, Where Love Is Gone. I don't know much about it, but he's trying to change his stars, so to speak. Now, another interesting thing I want to point out here, and you've probably all seen the trivia. If you notice, I didn't mention The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Twilight Zone, or The Outer Limits, because really he wasn't drawn to sci-fi, really. But our other cast members, male cast members, Shatner, Nimoy, and Doohan, they were all in Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Twilight Zone,
right.
and The Outer Limits.
Right. They were all working those shows.
Right. Right. So that brings us up right smack up to before he gets into Star Trek.
Well, I guess I'll pick it up from there.
Yes,
obviously, as you said, Roddenberry remembered him and decided to bring him in after the second pilot had sold, after the show sold to NBC. Paul Fix had played Dr. Piper in Where No Man Has Gone Before. And Paul wasn't as strong as Roddenberry thought maybe D. Kelley could be. And so he brought D. Kelley in to play Dr. McCoy.
Well, so just a little bit of information here. Roddenberry wanted him in the pilot and in the second pilot. And the studio execs said no because of his past at being the bad guy.
Because he was typecast.
He was typecast, right.
What a shame, too, because he would have been great in both of those. Can you imagine in The Cage when Captain Pike is kind of upset and the doctor comes in and pours him a drink and has a little heart-to-heart? Can you imagine if D. Kelley had played that?
Right.
The way he played it with Shatner?
Yep. Yeah. Now, in Star Trek Monthly, he had a quote, if you don't mind me reading.
No,
here.
Go ahead.
So this is D. Kelley speaking. He says, "I still remember Gene saying there are two roles in Star Trek he thought I'd be right for. One of them was Spock, and one of them was what I called High Noon Mr. McCoy, or Dr. McCoy. I thought it over, and I said, I'll take High Noon, Gene. High Noon worked out just fine for me. Wouldn't you agree?"
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, let me dive in here and start talking about Dr. McCoy. During Trek's first season, you'll probably notice that D. Kelley's name is not listed in the opening credits, but it is listed in the second and third season's opening credits because D. Kelley wasn't considered as one of the stars of the show. He was considered as a supporting actor. But his role, Kelley brought so much to the screen in the first season in the guise of Dr. McCoy that his role grew. And they decided, you know what, this guy, he needs to be one of our stars. And so he was made a quote-unquote star in the second and third seasons. And that got D a nice pay raise. He was making $850 an episode in season 1. That got bumped up to $2,500.
Wow.
For 2 and 3. Yep. Despite the show's recognition of Kelley as one of its stars, he became very frustrated by how much attention that Shatner and Nimoy received throughout the series. Here he was recognized now as one of the stars, and he thought, hey, how about a little love for the doc, you know?
Right.
But that didn't come to pass because Spock became so popular, Spock mania, some people call it, that even Shatner got jealous of Leonard Nimoy. So there was a little bit of going on behind the scenes. And, of course, Kelley made his character very well known by the way he picked on Spock and by some phrases that have become known today as doctorisms. These are phrases that begin with, I'm a doctor, not a, and then whatever else he said after that. So here are some of his best doctorisms. What am I, a doctor or a moon shuttle conductor? That's sort of a variation. That's from the Corbomite maneuver. I'm a doctor, not a flesh peddler. I'm a doctor. When I peek, it's in the line of duty. That's from Shore Leave. I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer. I'm a surgeon, not a psychiatrist. I'm a doctor, not a scientist. I'm a doctor, not a physicist. This is my favorite one. I'm a doctor, not an escalator.
Yes, I love that one.
I'm a doctor, not a mechanic. I'm a doctor, not an engineer. I'm not a magician, Spock, just an old country doctor. That's from The Deadly Years. I'm a doctor, not a coal miner. That's from The Empath. And then in The Empath, we get a second one. I'm a doctor, not a mechanic. So I love those. Every time I know there's one coming, I get excited.
Yeah. Yes.
Especially in Friday's Child. I'm a doctor, not an escalator. I love
Escalator. That's awesome.
that. Of course, McCoy is also known for another saying, and you brought it up earlier, he's dead, Jim, or variations of it.
Right.
In fact, in an interview on TLC in the 90s, he jokingly admitted that one of his biggest fears was that his tombstone would read, "He's dead, Jim." Here are some variations of that line. So here we go. He's dead. He's dead, Jim. He's dead, doctor. He's dead. It's dead. He's dead, Captain. This man is dead. He's dead. He's dead. He's dead. She's dead. He's dead, Jim. She's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim. He's dead, sir. She's dead. I examined Chekhov. He's dead. Scotty's dead. This Tribble is dead. He's dead, Captain. He's dead. The captain is dead. He's dead. He's dead, Jim. She's dead. Of course, that is all the way back, starting with the man trap, his first time he said it, and it ends with the lights of Zetar in season 3. And in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, McCoy was originally supposed to say, when Spock was irradiated, "He's dead, Jim." That's what was written in the script. But Kelley refused to say it. And he felt that it would make the audience laugh, which would have been really inappropriate for such a serious scene. So instead, Scotty said, "He's dead already." And Kelley was a little bit happier about that.
Yeah. Well,
as the show went on, Kelley was pretty happy to have the work, but when it ended, he thought, okay, well, I'm going to start up my TV and film career again. He was concerned about being typecast, and sure enough, he was. He appeared in very few movies after Star Trek went off the air. His only non-Trek role after 1970, following the cancellation, was in the 1972 horror science fiction B-movie Night of the Lepus. And
Lupus.
It's Lepus, Lepus. Lepus is a rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
A big, giant, scary rabbit.
I love that movie.
Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah.
God bless you. Okay. Co-starring in that film was another Star Trek doctor, Paul Fix, who we talked about earlier, who played Dr. Mark Piper in Where No Man Has Gone Before. Kelley did, however, continue working in TV, guest starring on shows all through the early 70s. One of those was Ironside. And, of course, who else was a star on Ironside? Why, none other than Barbara Anderson, who played, again, we're going to say this, Lenore Caridian in the episode Conscience of the King. We always seem to come back to the episode Conscience of the King. I think I'm beginning to think there's some sort of universal crux point right there with Conscience of the King. We're going to have to, that's our next podcast, the Conscience of the King podcast. I just said that jokingly, but it sounds sort of cool.
Should we get some astrophysicists or
I don't know.
somebody doing string theory to explain it to us?
No clue what that will be about, but we'll get there. We'll figure it out. Kelley was also in an episode of Owen Marshall. That is D. Kelley, not Kelly Casto. In an episode of Owen Marshall, Counselor at Law, with Paul Fix again. So he also guested later on the show Room 222. Do you remember that show in the early 70s?
Oh, yes.
About a school and... Well, the star of that show was Lloyd Haynes. Now, Lloyd Haynes had played Lieutenant Alden. He sat on the bridge of the Enterprise as a communications officer in the Star Trek second pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before. And also in Room 222 was a very cute Karen Valentine. I just wanted to mention it. I had a crush on her when I was a little kid. I thought she was adorable. Karen Valentine. I don't know where you are today. Loved you when I was a little kid. Still do. D. Kelley's last guest role in the 1970s was on a show called The Cowboys, and the episode was called David Dunnett. A co-star on that show was none other than Clint Howard, who played the alien Baylock in the Trek episode The Corbomite Maneuver. After The Cowboys, Dee worked on Star Trek The Animated Series in 1973 and 74. And then he didn't work again in the 70s until 1979 and Star Trek The Motion Picture. And I think we mentioned this before. I don't think he had to work because he was getting paid for being signed to Phase 2 and a couple other Star Trek projects that never came to be. So he was earning a paycheck and just sitting back and relaxing. Nice work if you can get it.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't really need to act either because in the late 70s, he was making about $50,000 a year on convention appearances. And if you think about that money and convert it to today's dollars, it's like $184,000.
It's pretty good.
You can live off of that.
Yeah.
I could live off of that. In 1981, he played the part of Professor Hal Schaefer in an episode of The Littlest Hobo. Now, this is a show that was about a wandering dog, a German shepherd. I don't remember that show.
I don't remember that.
But if the dog was here, I would pet it and tell it it was a good boy. After that, Dee played only Dr. McCoy roles in 9 more Star Trek films or projects. And when I say projects, these were, you know, computer games and things like that.
Right.
Interestingly, too, Dee also wrote poetry in the 80s. Yeah. And in fact, he read some of his work at Star Trek conventions, and you can go to YouTube and search for that stuff, and you'll be able to see it. Very cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
His final appearance as McCoy was in 1991's The Undiscovered Country. And it's funny, too, because Leonard Nimoy was the executive producer on that movie. And he kind of recognized that D. Kelley hadn't been paid as well as Shatner and himself. So he arranged for Dee to be paid $1 million for that film.
Wow.
Yeah, just to sort of make up for everything that he hadn't gotten in the past. Of course, prior to The Undiscovered Country, he played McCoy in the pilot movie for Star Trek The Next Generation. Right. And in it, he played a 137-year-old Admiral McCoy who tours the Enterprise, and you remember him talking to Data, and he says, well, the ship's got a good name, take care of her, and she'll always come through for you, or something like that. You know?
Yeah.
But
he finally got promoted.
He got a hell of a promotion, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
His appearance really was a sort of passing of the torch, don't you think, from the original Star Trek generation to the next generation.
Yeah, and who better to do it?
And who better to do it? And pun intended, by the way. And it's funny, too, you know, because prior to this TNG appearance, here's what Dee had to say about a new Star Trek show. Quote, "It's a mystery to me why they are doing it. I assume Paramount thinks they can hold on to the Star Trek phenomenon. There's no doubt we can't go on forever, so they're trying a way to keep it going. But there's only one Star Trek, and that's ours," unquote. So,
interesting.
Yeah, he kind of thought that a version of Star Trek without the original crew would never work. And look what happened, though. And if you listened to our show last week about Star Trek Discovery, I guess Dee would be one of those deniers and naysayers we talked about.
Yeah, probably would.
D. Kelley retired from acting in the mid-90s, but he did do one more project. In 1998, he played the voice, or I should say he lended his voice to the character Viking 1 in the Disney animated film The Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars. I have to admit I missed that. I didn't get to see it.
I missed it, too.
Later in life, he commented in an interview that he was very, very proud that so many Trek fans had told him that they went into medicine because of Dr. McCoy's example. And he was very proud of that. He would hear that at conventions over and over again. And that he carried that with him throughout his life. He was very, very proud of that.
And he should be.
He really, really should be. During the 90s, a lot of Trek actors wrote autobiographies. D. Kelley, in fact, is the only cast member who did not publish a book. And he died of stomach cancer in 1999. And his body was cremated, and the ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean. And he was actually the first original cast member to pass on. His obituary in Newsweek magazine started this way, quote, "We're not even going to try to resist. He's dead, Jim." Next time, we're taking a trip that Star Trek never got to make.
Yes, we're going to the planet of Titans. See you then.
Thanks for listening to 70s Trek, an independent fan production. Join us next week as we explore more about the production, the actors, the producers, and the influencers of Star Trek in the lost decade of the 1970s on 70s Trek.